This video is how to adjust the primary chain tension on a Harley Davidson Big Twin. This particular Harley Davidson Big Twin is a 1991 FXR lowrider. And you can see right by the shifter here, this oil that has leaked out. That's a pretty common Harley Davidson problem, so I'll show you how to fix that on this particular type of motorcycle. Now if you have a shifter up in the front, then you'll just have an adjustment plate there and it won't have the leaking problem. But on this model, the shift lever goes onto a shifting rod which goes through the primary to that linkage over to the transmission. All right, to begin we need to gain access to this cover by removing the shifter lever and also removing the foot peg. To remove the shift lever, take a 3/16 Allen wrench, loosen up this bolt here. Alright, just remove that shift lever by pulling it towards you, like that. I like to put the bolt back into it a little bit so that it doesn't get lost in my mess. Well, the foot peg is held on by these two 1/4 inch Allen head bolts. You just need to get an Allen wrench on there and take them out. Alright, that comes off easily. And next, clean this up a little bit. It is filthy. Alright, we take a 5/32 inch Allen wrench. Remove all these little bolts. Now that the bolts are out, we have to get this plate off without damaging anything. So you might be tempted to jam a screwdriver in here and pry it, but what I like to use is a plastic painter's palette knife. You can also use a wooden popsicle stick to just sort of convince it to come out without doing any damage. It's going to leak a little oil when you do that. Slowly, there. So that comes off unscathed, and we put it to the side in a safe place, keep it nice. Now you can see your primary chain adjuster. And you can see there's a rubber O-ring around this plastic tube. So the shifter goes through this plastic tube to the back side of the engine where it accesses the transmission. But this plastic tube doesn't rotate relative to this plate. So when we put it back together, instead of just this O-ring, we can actually put some silicone around here, just a little bit, and that will seal it from leaking more effectively than the O-ring does. So in an ideal world, you would want to be able to see the deflection of the chain in here and then push it up and down, measure it against this measuring tape. So what I like to do is create a tool that gives me an L shape. So I can stick this in the hole, push up on the chain with this, and measure how far up and down the wrench goes. Right, so go in there, measure the deflection. I make contact, I can feel it make contact with the chain right here. And I push up on it. And it's just a little bit over 1/2 inch. And the recommended cold adjustment for the primary chain is 5/8 to 7/8 of an inch. So that's just right. I don't really want to make it any looser, don't want to make it any tighter. Also, you want to test it in a number of different positions. You want to have your bike in neutral so that the chain isn't being stopped by the transmission, so that when you push up on it, it takes all the slack out of the bottom end. And you want to try it in a number of different positions. So crank the engine over a bunch of times, measure it, crank it over, measure it again, crank it over, measure it again. And you want to have that 5/8 inch setting, 5/8 to 7/8 of an inch setting, to be the tightest position in the chain. So if your chain has looser spots in it, that's okay, but you don't want to adjust the loosest setting to be 5/8 of an inch, because then your tightest setting is going to be way too tight and it could do more damage. So if you look in the hole here, you can see this plastic pad, which is the primary chain tension adjuster, and the chain rides on that, and depending on how high this is, it's tighter, or how low it is, it's looser. So to adjust it, you loosen up this nut right here, and then it will, you can pry up on it to move it up until your chain is at the correct tension level. And so now the chain doesn't get out of adjustment very often, so if you're running a stock motorcycle, it's built to last a long time and not to stretch very much, which means you'll just check it and it'll be fine. If you don't like adjusting your chain tension, or just don't want to deal with it anymore, you can put one of these in. This is an automatic primary chain tensioner. This particular one is from Hayden Enterprises. I know that Harley Davidson has started making aftermarket ones too. So you can see there's a spring, there's your chain tensioning pad, there's a spring that maintains the constant tension all the time. The pad goes on top of the spring, slides in there under the chain, and the spring tension keeps your chain tight enough to run perfectly but not too tight to do damage. And you just put that in and leave it alone forever and don't worry about it anymore. I'm going to put this in some future video. I don't have the time today. I've got about 45 minutes left and then I'm going to be busy for the next week or two. Now to address the leak in the shifter shaft, I want to get this as clean as possible. This is a ABS plastic tube and there's a rubber O-ring around it. Now the Harley experts have told me that even if you replace the rubber O-ring, it'll still leak. That it's just a pretty poor design, and that's the problem. So we clean that out. We clean out the hole in the cover. So I'm just going to take a little bit of the clear silicone adhesive sealant. I'm going to be pretty sparing with it because next time I want to go to take the cover off, I don't want it to be permanently stuck. But this tip comes to me from some guys I know who run a Harley shop, and they swear that it is safe and effective and pretty much the only way to stop this leak. Now again, you don't have to worry about the rotation of the shifter lever because the plastic tube that I'm putting the silicone on doesn't rotate at all in use. It's just a pass-through tube that the shifter goes through. Alright, there we go. Just slide the cover back on. Then we'll put the bolts back in. Now obviously this adhesive is going to take a while to cure, so I'm going to let it sit for a day or two before I ride it. Now if I had been going to change the primary fluid, I would have just drained the quart out and then put another quart in. That's what I've been told to do by all the experts, is that you don't really need to check a level as long as you have a full quart bottle. Just drain out what's in there and put another quart in. You do want to make sure that it is Big Twin primary oil and not Sportster primary oil. And when you're buying your oil, you can see it's specially marked. This one says, specially blended for Big Twins primary oil. And you might think that's some kind of marketing hype or that it's all the same. And it might be, I don't honestly know. But the fact is, on the Big Twin, the clutch and the primary chain are all that is oiled by this oil. Whereas on the Sportster, the transmission also shares that oil. So they claim that on a Sportster you use a different kind of oil because it has to lubricate gears. And on the Big Twin, it's just lubricating a chain and a clutch. So it's a different formulation. Alright, the foot peg has been replaced. Now it's time to put the shifter back on. Now I didn't mention this when I took it off, so hopefully you haven't been watching my video and taking your motorcycle apart at the same time. When you put the shifter on, you can put it up here, you can put it down here, put it somewhere in between. Then there's a good chance that you were used to it in whatever position it was already in. So it's a good idea before you take it off to get a grease pencil and just put a mark on it and then a mark on the end of the shaft here so that you can line those marks up and put it back in exactly the same position that it was when you took it off. If you don't do that, then you might end up with it a little higher or a little lower, and it'll just feel funny when you're riding your bike. So I highly recommend that. I would have done it, but I can't find my grease pencil. I don't know who took it. For reference, this is the level where I like to have my shifter. A little bit less than level with the ground. Make sure that you have clearance, of course. That's neutral, first gear, neutral, up into second. So there's enough clearance between the foot peg and the shifter here. And that's really it. Tighten up the bolt, let the silicone dry for a day or two, and then ride.